In 1974, San Francisco played host to a strange killer that operated in a way that police had never seen before. This sicko sketched portraits of his victims before he stabbed them to death. The Doodler case has been reopened, and by the looks of things, there are many, many more victims, and police know exactly who he is and where he lives. If you're interested in the real cases, the kind that dig into the darkest corners of humanity, the mysteries that others are too afraid to confront, subscribe, because you've come to the right place. This is Evidence Obscured, the channel where no case is off limits. Let's get into it, shall we? Here's the story of the Doodler, San Francisco's most infamous serial killer.
Yeah, I believe there might be a dead person on the beach at right across from Ulloa Street. If you follow the street right down to the water, I was right along there and I saw somebody lying there, but I didn't want to get too close because you know what could happen. Okay?
Did you want to give me something?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I just wanted to let somebody know. Maybe he needs help or something. But, so it was my duty to report it.
Okay, fine. Let's check it out.
Okay.
Bye.
That was the call that came in at 2 o'clock in the morning, January 27, 1974. First off, what's a guy doing down at the beach that time of night? And secondly, how did he even see the victim? The moon was almost non-existent that night. So unless this person had been standing within 4 feet of the victim, he shouldn't have been able to see him in the water, hidden by the weeds that grew on the bluff. 49-year-old Gerald Earl Kavanaugh was stabbed 17 times and fully submerged in the water yards away from the shoreline. No, this was almost certainly the killer himself calling in. He wanted Gerald to be found before the ocean swallowed him up. And like many of the future victims, this murder was rife with problems from the start. Gerald had no ID on him, so it took years to identify him, and that area, Ocean Beach, hugged San Francisco's gay club scene. You can probably tell where this is going. In 1974, the cops weren't too focused about identifying dead gay men, so Gerald wasn't going to be a priority for a while yet. 5 months later, another call came in, this time relating to a body tucked into some bushes in Golden Gate Park, another place where gay men were known to meet in secret. The victim, Joseph Stevens, known mostly by his stage name Jay, was a 27-year-old drag queen that was pretty well known both in San Francisco's club scene and in the media for his hilarious performances. He'd been stabbed 5 times, was fully clothed, and all of his personal possessions were stolen. Thankfully, his fame allowed him to be identified quickly, and like Gerald, he'd fought back hard against his attacker. No one was putting the pieces together just yet. San Francisco might have had one of the biggest gay scenes in the country, but it was also one of the most violent places for hate crimes against gay men. Sadly, 2 men stabbed to death in popular gay social places wasn't that out of the ordinary, and quite frankly, police could care less. Just 12 days later, that attitude would change drastically. Klaus Achim Christianmann, a 31-year-old German national, was found stabbed so viciously that he'd been nearly decapitated, fully clothed, and with all of his personal items, like his ID and wallet, missing. Now police had a problem. Klaus was an international visitor.
The man had been stabbed approximately 15 times. His throat had been slashed, his neck had been slashed, he'd been stabbed in the chest, in the abdomen, in the stomach, and in the back. His pockets had been torn out of his jacket, and we found 1 penny in his pockets of his Levi's. And we still don't know who the man is. He's listed as a John Doe number 82 at the present time, and we're making an appeal to the public, through the television people here in the city, to see if they recognize this man's photograph, to contact us here in the homicide detail so we can find out who he is, where he came from, and just what he was doing out there just before he was killed.
He had a wife and kids back in Germany who were demanding answers, not to mention the German government that were breathing down their necks too. Klaus, it turns out, was a closeted gay man that frequented several bars in the area, and a few of his previous boyfriends came forward admitting to dating him and seeing him right before he died. He left the bar at 2 a.m. on July the 7th and was killed shortly after. At least Klaus's murder was initially investigated without the knowledge that he was gay, so his case got much more attention from the cops at first, and most importantly, from the gay scene in San Francisco. When the case ran dry, the community spread the word as far and wide as possible. 3 men, all gay, all well-liked, and all patrons of the same clubs had been stabbed to death. Even if police weren't willing to admit it, the community were sure that they had a serial killer amongst them. Security at clubs were on high alert. Men didn't go out alone anymore, and no one was willing to leave with strangers. For a year, the killer went quiet, probably because men were no longer willing to meet in shadowy places for fear of being the next victim. But a year is a long time, enough for people to forget about the danger. On the morning of April the 7th, 1975, 52-year-old attorney Warren Andrews was found at a popular lover's lane called Land's End, within walking distance from where Jay was found. Warren was brutally beaten with a tree branch and a rock and was barely clinging to life when he was found. Unfortunately, he died a few weeks later without ever regaining consciousness. 4 months later, 32-year-old former Navy man and nurse Frederick Elmer Cappan was found dead from 16 stab wounds, his wallet gone, and on Ocean Beach, the same place where 2 other victims were found. Finally, with 5 victims all killed in the exact same manner, with the exception of Warren, all dumped in the same locations and all gay, or suspected to be so. I mean, at this point, they have to act. And boy, did these victims get the cream of the crop. The investigators that led the task force were known as the Soul Brothers, and they were legends in their field. Rhodia Guilford and Earl Sanders were the first black detectives on San Francisco's police force, and they were quick to make connections. First, they discovered that Klaus and Frederick were both last seen at the same bar, the Bojangles. Actually, all of the victims frequented the same clubs, and those clubs all reported seeing the same strange man. He appeared on the scene at the same time that the first murder occurred and continued to hang around until the last attacks before suddenly disappearing. A guy with a sketch pad would walk into bars and sit quietly in a corner, sketching the patrons. Apparently, he was extremely talented and drew a lot of attention for his drawings that looked so realistic that many stopped to comment on them. According to the clubgoers who'd seen and spoken to the Doodler, they were looking for a young black man in his early to mid-20s that dressed and spoke like he came from a middle-class neighborhood. In early June 1975, the badly decomposed body of 65-year-old Harold Goldberg was found hidden in some bushes on the Lincoln Park golf course. Again, just a stone's throw away from Golden Gate Park. Harold's pants were undone, his underwear and wallet were gone, and he'd been stabbed to death. A month later, a man stumbled into an ER, drenched in blood, coming from the multitude of stab wounds littering his body. How he managed to walk into the hospital is a miracle in and of itself. The man was a diplomat, so he refused to make an official statement, and to this day, we still don't know his name. Yet again, Guilford and Sanders proved to be extremely convincing because they got Mr. Diplomat to tell them more than any of the previous survivors. Mr. Diplomat was eating at a diner after being out clubbing all night. He struck up a conversation with a young black man quietly sketching animals next to him. He was handsome, charming, and mentioned that he was planning on studying to become a cartoonist when Mr. Diplomat mentioned that he too studied art. The conversation quickly led to Mr. Diplomat inviting the artist over to his apartment. When they got there, the artist launched himself at the Diplomat, growling the words, "All you guys are alike," while stabbing him 6 times. He only stopped and ran from the scene when the steak knife broke off inside the Diplomat's body. Though Mr. Diplomat refused to make a public statement, he did agree to sit down for a composite sketch. The sketch is still the same one used to this very day. 2 weeks after this attack, another man in the same apartment building where Mr. Diplomat lived was assaulted in the exact same way. Meanwhile, the composite sketch was bringing in the tips. All of them pointed to a man living in the East Bay area that was an attractive artist. One was from another potential victim, a famous actor who was about to get intimate with the Doodler when a steak knife, very much like the one that was used to stab the Diplomat, fell out of his pocket. The actor ran away, probably saving his life. The suspect, who's never been publicly named, fit the descriptions and sketch to a T. The Diplomat even picked him out of a lineup, but he, the actor, and the Diplomat's neighbor all refused to cooperate further. Without their testimony in court, there is no case at all, and that's where the case stood, at a standoff for the past 4 decades. Last year, the Doodler case was officially reopened. The case now is in the hands of detectives Dan Cunningham and Dan Dedette. They released the 9/11 call. The age-progressed composite was sent out. Several items that might have DNA on it were delivered to labs, and they even brought in the handsome artist for questioning again. He's still living in the East Bay area, now as an openly gay man. But there were 2 hiccups that stalled matters yet again. The only suspect still maintained that he was innocent, and the records from the psychiatrist's office cannot be released. Well, they can, but the courts decided that there wasn't sufficient evidence to justify the release of hundreds of patients' records that belonged to a psychiatrist that is now long dead. Cunningham and Dedette are just as hungry to close this as the Soul brothers were. They've tracked their suspect's movement since 1976. Apparently, our guy skipped town when the scene got too hot for him to handle. He traveled to several cities for a few years before coming back to San Fran. Along the way, there are several more murder cases that correlate to his time spent in those cities, and the MO is similar to the San Francisco victim's manner of death. So 6 victims and 3 survivors might only be the tip of the iceberg for the Doodler. The detectives are keeping a lot close to the chest for now, mostly because they're waiting on the DNA. As you can imagine, evidence stored back in the 70s isn't going to be in the best condition, so isolating a viable sample is going to take time and a few miracles to get something that's workable enough to test against the one and only suspect they have. So all we can do now is wait and hope that the long process of working through hundreds of pieces of evidence that's 4 decades old somehow held on to a preserved sample of DNA. You can bet that the team here at Evidence Obscured is going to keep an eye on any developments. And now, the question goes over to you. How many more victims are there? Is this suspect really the Doodler? And how long do you think it'll be before we have any answers? Only time will tell, but in the meantime, leave your thoughts down in the comments. And, like and subscribe while you're at it. You don't want to miss an update on one of the country's most infamous killers when it finally does come. When it does, we'll be here to let you know. See you in the next one, people.